Hey math students, in this video I'm going to be solving the best quadratic equation of all, the most general one. So in this problem we're going to actually be deriving the quadratic formula by hand. And notice that the quadratic equation we're going to solve is 0 equals ax squared plus bx plus c, where a, b, and c can be any real number you want. In fact, it turns out it even works if a, b, and c are complex numbers, but that gets complicated. Let's just assume a, b, and c are any real number you want, but a cannot be 0, because if a were 0, it wouldn't be a quadratic equation at all. It would be linear. So let's assume a is not 0 throughout. Okay, let's get started. Oh, and by the way, you should pause the video and try this. If you know how to complete the square, see if you can solve this for x completely with a's, b's, and c's. And if you can, then you've done it yourself and you're a master at completing the square. Okay, let's do it. So there's a number of ways I could approach this. They all are equivalent, but I could shift things around. But the first thing I'm going to do is going to make this work out a little easier is I'm just going to subtract c from both sides. It's helpful in this case to get c by itself. And in order to complete the square of this, we need the leading coefficient of x squared to be 1. That'll make our completing the square trick work. So I can divide everything by a. If I divide everything by a, I get c over a equals x squared plus b over a x. This is equivalent to factoring out a from the x terms, which is what I've done in prior examples. Okay. You may remember to complete the square, our trick is to take the coefficient in front of x, multiply it by 1/2 or divide it by 2, and square the result. So what we will get here is negative c over a. And I'm going to add this to both sides of the equation. Or you can add and subtract it on the same side of the equation. Either way. Since I've got it written this way, I'm just going to do b squared over, why did I write an x there? That's so silly. This is b over a. Just realized I wrote x. That's b over a plus 1/2 squared. Okay, so I have b over 4a squared. And also, what you can do also, and this is actually helpful on the right-hand side, is instead of writing it as add b squared over 4a squared, I can just leave it as b over 2a all squared. Okay. Let me just scooch this a little bit. Okay, so what we've done is we've used our completing the square trick to figure out what we add and subtract. I decided instead to just add the same thing to both sides of the equation. And what we know from prior examples is that this right-hand side is a perfect square. And it factors in the following way. b over 2a squared. And the left-hand side is, if we do a little work with the fractions, we get negative c, negative 4ac, I'll just make that an a, c, all over, or plus b squared, all over 4a squared. So I got a common denominator, wrote it as a single fraction. Okay. Awesome, we're moving along. If I do a little rearrangement, I'm going to rewrite this on this side. And I will rearrange things on the right-hand side. B squared minus 4ac all over 4a squared. Microsoft OneNote really wanted me to have a heart in the equation. 4a squared. Okay, now I can take square roots of both sides. X plus b over 2a equals plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 4a squared. Subtract the b over 2a. X equals negative b over 2a plus or minus. And now I'm going to take the square root of the top and the square root of the bottom. The square root of the top is just the square root of that thing, b squared minus 4ac. And the square root of the bottom is 2a. Now, you may know that if you take the square root of 4a squared, and let's assume a can be any real number. We know a is not 0, but it could be negative. That this would be 2 absolute value of a. But since we have the plus or minus in the front, it handles both cases of absolute value, whether a is negative or a is positive. So we don't need to write the absolute value here. It's handled with the plus or minus. So that's an equivalent way of handling the absolute value. Okay, now we actually have this over a common denominator, and we're done. X equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. All right, that is the equation of the quadratic formula, and this formula will solve any quadratic equation of any kind that you're going to run into. And when you have a quadratic equation written in this form, you can write down what your a, b, and c values are, and just come down here to this formula and plug in your b values wherever there's a b, plug in your a values wherever there's an a, plug in your c value wherever there's a c, and calculate it, and you're done. And you get the 2 solutions. Sometimes you get one solution that's multiplicity 2. We'll talk about that in the future. And so this formula works to solve any quadratic. Just want to make a note that although you will never see the quadratic formula written this way in any textbook, it's actually super useful to know that it looks like this, because this is a preview of a future lesson, but negative b over 2a is actually the x-coordinate of the vertex of the parabola, and it's easier to see from this form of the quadratic formula. But this is the one you should memorize, and this is the one that is standard to use to solve any quadratic. All right, see you in the next video. Bye-bye.